Welcome to Spotlight Business. I'm Tammy Defoe, and I'd like you to meet Sara Bibb. She is one of the featured speakers at GTApreneurs BizX 2025 Business Expo Conference, taking place on Tuesday, October 21st, an all-day event. It's going to be a fantastic time for you to get lots of warm leads for your business and meet Sara, of course, in person, and she's going to give us a great presentation then. But before then, let's learn more about her. So thanks for coming on the show today, Sara. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Tammy.
You're very welcome. So tell us more about yourself.
So I'm the CEO and founder of MKS HR Consulting. I have been in the world of human resources for over 20 years. I started my career back in 2003, so I might be dating myself a little bit. But I started out in corporate, started out at smaller companies, and then worked my way up into larger companies. And then in 2014, I launched my own independent practice, and I have been serving small and mid-sized business owners for the last 10 years. I'm going into my 11th year. How I came into HR, like many students when they graduate university, I didn't necessarily know I was going to come into the field of HR, but I always knew I wanted to do that. I always like working with people and helping people. So I started to do some research. I ended up going back to school, got my postgraduate into HR management. And then in 2003, that's when I started my HR career. And I got my professional designation. So I have letters after my name, which I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. I just didn't know it was going to be CHRL. But that's kind of how I came to be HR professional. And then in 2014, when I launched the business, I was at a crossroads in my career. I was looking for another corporate job, but I didn't want to necessarily have a big, long commute. And my in-laws own a small family business. So when they're constantly asking me HR questions, so I knew that there was a need there. So I started the business and I have been doing that ever since.
Okay, perfect. Great. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Like HR is such an important part of people's businesses and is something hiring good employees. It's one of the biggest challenges for small business owners.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
really
And
is. Yeah.
yeah. And the one thing I find the difference between kind of doing the hiring on in with the larger corporations versus small business owners is with larger corporations, they have that fixed budget that they have every single year, where small business owners don't necessarily have that advantage. So they really have to make sure that they find the right person the first time. And that's one of the things that I always strive with my clients is that we make sure that we find that right person the first time. Because if that person doesn't work out,
Mhm.
it's not as if it's like, oh, no big deal. We can just dip back into our hiring budget and then hire someone else. It's a much larger impact to the business. So that's why I really focus on making sure that person is the right fit for the business, not just on the technical skill side.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is one reason I'm really looking forward to having you as one of our speakers because these are the people. Right, right, including myself. We've all been through this before where we go through employees, we spend all this time training them, right? And we spend money, trying to recruit them and stuff, and then it doesn't work out, unfortunately. And then you have to start all over again. So if you
Yeah.
have someone like yourself who is experienced in this, because I've never taken HR, right? Most business owners have, so we're good at what we do, but that we just try to do our best with it. But if you have someone who actually knows, then you can maybe try to help us avoid that situation where we do hire someone and then we have to start over again because
Yeah.
it's not even just the time and the money that you lose, right? But it's putting your whole business behind like a whole month of new income potential or something like that. So
Yeah, yeah. So how I kind of work with my clients is I work with them like on a fractional basis. So they're not large enough to need full-time HR every single day, but the need does come up once in a while. So that's why where I'll come in specific situations and kind of help them out. Recently, I just have a new client that came on and I'm doing an HR audit where I'm going through and looking at their current handbook to make sure it's compliant and up to date. And then we're also going through a couple of different specific employee situations and kind of working through them and figuring out how we can handle them. One
mhm.
particular situation is an employee seemed like from the business owner's perspective that the employee had resigned from their position, but they actually didn't. And one of the learnings is that, sometimes in the heat of the moment, an employee will say, like, I'm done with this, or, like, don't call me for a couple of days. And then you don't hear from them for a really long period of time. And a lot of small business owners don't realize that there is that onus on the business owner to follow up with that employee and not necessarily take that as a resignation. You always kind of want to get something like that in writing and just reach out and just say, hey, following up on that conversation, how things are going. This is what I thought this was meant in that conversation. I find a lot of small business owners are afraid to talk to their employees because they think that if they talk to their employees, they're going to get in trouble. And that's not necessarily the case.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of things to be aware of nowadays, right? A lot of different sensitivities out there and that. So is that something you also offer, like some training for employers who, okay.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I worked with another client this summer with all of their upper management team and taking them through, I call it the legal side of HR, and just having them understand here are the minimum standards from employment standards legislation, human rights, health and safety. So kind of that basic legal 101 as kind of what I called it, and training them through that so that they're aware, so that if they need to have a conversation, they know what they can and cannot say,
Right.
and things like that. And especially a lot of investigations happens. A lot of employees will kind of claim that they're being harassed, and the legal onus is on the business owner is to look into all of those claims and do an investigation. So the one thing is going through that process and determining, is there actual harassment happening, or what does that look like? Because a lot of times it is harassment, but then there are a lot of times where it isn't necessarily harassment. So training the managers so they know what the difference is.
Mhm. Yeah, that's amazing. So can you walk us through like each of the different things, how you help the business owners from the beginning and all the stages?
Yes. So business owners, when they come to me looking for the fractional HR support, they kind of come in two different ways into my practice. One would be if they're looking to hire an employee. So I basically take a good chunk of the hiring process off of their plate. And
Mhm.
so I take that on. Now I do hire them where this employee is a direct employee of my client. So it's not set up as a temp agency.
Right.
So I basically take the lot of the front end work off the client's plate, create a job posting, market it, create that pipeline of candidates, and do all of that heavy lifting at the beginning in terms of reviewing all the resumes. And then
Mhm.
I pre-qualify them so then they can interview face to face the top three, four candidates for one position, as an example. That's one way. Another way clients come to me is they say, I'm looking to possibly terminate this employee. How do I go about doing it legally? What are my options? So that then turns into here's how you handle that type of a situation. And then a lot of times that turns into, well, let's review what processes you have in place. What are your policies if you have them? What do your contracts look like? Because at the end of the day, having an employee on a signed contract is always really helpful to the
Mhm.
business and to the employee. So that turns into kind of doing an initial HR audit and compliance. And then that morphs into, well, I now have this other situation with this employee, or I have an employee where, there's conflict between two employees. So how do you kind of handle that? So it then turns into that fractional where if they need me, they can kind of pick up the phone as if they were in like the big corporate office and go talk to HR on the fifth floor sort of thing.
Mhm. Nice. Yeah, it's really great. Yeah, so you said it's something that business owners need, right? Again, I'm really looking forward to having you as a presenter and stuff. I know we don't want to give away all your tips and tricks because we want to
Mhm.
save those for the event. But I'm so
Yep.
happy that you're able to come on today and just say hi to everybody. So it's been a pleasure, and we will talk to you again soon.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I look forward to meeting everyone on the day.